From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Anne-Marie Hordurin, I'm Joe Matthew.
The October jobs report showing a near two-year high in unemployment with slower than expected job growth. 150,000 jobs added in the month, 30,000 less than projected, and almost half of September's total.
The calm after the storm. Now that the House has passed its Israel aid bill, it's set to run into a wall in the Senate. Where do things go from here with a government shutdown just 2 weeks away?
And we're joined today by former top labor advisor to President Biden, Seth Harris, and former Congressman Denver Riggleman from Virginia. Joe, we have to first talk about this jobs report.
Yeah.
The president, of course, came out with his favorite superlative. For 21 months in a row, the unemployment rate is under 4%.
Yes.
But you dig a little bit deeper, and there's some pockets in the U.S. economy, some sectors, some individuals where actually the unemployment's going higher. And how much longer is it going to be lasting under 4%?
Yeah.
But potentially, like Janet Yellen said, she's seeing evidence of a soft landing. Is this report evidence of that?
Right. That's the big question. Or is it evidence of a more likely recession, which some models are showing here? And you can certainly find columns on the Bloomberg that would support both theories. At the moment, though, the White House seems to be in celebration mode for the most part. I spoke with Jared Bernstein earlier at the White House on Bloomberg Radio. Yeah, he joined us from a sunny North Lawn, and he was smiling today. Let's listen to what Jared had to say.
Job gains at this pace feel right to me. Is the cooling we see in the job market the kind of cooling that gets us on a transition to what some call a soft landing, which we've talked about as steady, stable growth, or is it something more threatening than that? Nobody knows the answer to that question.
Now, that's the chairman speaking. Of course, he needs to put a good spin on this, but they actually have numbers to work with. And when people are suggesting that the Fed might be done, that probably sounds like good news at the White House.
But the bigger issue for this White House is if the unemployment rate ticks higher and inflation doesn't come down closer to 2%, and we get to November of 2024, they're in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely. And joining us around the table to continue this conversation, Bloomberg's Julie Fine and Enda Curran. Enda, we've got models, as I mentioned, from Bloomberg Economics showing a recession likely in the second half of next year. To Anne-Marie's point, a rising unemployment rate would point us that way, and the data might show some signs already. That would coincide with election season for Joe Biden.
These numbers are starting to head in the wrong direction from a political viewpoint. We are seeing now a slower pace of job creation. Some of it, of course, did reflect the auto worker strike, but even when you net that out, when you consider revisions previous months, the economy is creating less jobs than it did. The headline unemployment rate, as you mentioned earlier, almost at a two-year high. Government spending actually was a big part of the job creation list. Now, it's not falling off a cliff, but it lends itself to the idea that the economy is slowing. We have data this week saying consumer confidence is weakening. We had very weak data on the manufacturing sector as well. And, of course, we had the Fed out saying they're probably maybe at the very least going to be very careful about raising interest rates again. It all adds up to a slowing economy. A recession, of course, is a different call.
If it is a slowing economy, isn't this exactly what the Fed wants? But how can they make sure that their unemployment rate doesn't go too high and inflation is still not being brought down?
Well, this is a big challenge. So I had several notes in my inbox today. I think I counted 4, calling it a Goldilocks economy. So things are coming down at a nice glide path. That's all fine. But to your point, Anne-Marie, if inflation doesn't keep coming off the way it should, and we get into maybe early next year and the Fed are faced with slowing growth but still sticky inflation, they have to raise rates, that's not a good mix for anyone.
Julie Fine, we were talking earlier with our Republican analyst, Rick Davis, who says pay less attention to the political polls out there and more to, say, consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan, which is pointing lower. Data like we saw today, add gas prices. And this is more a story about the way people feel sometimes than what these numbers are showing. What do you think?
I think if people are feeling like they're paying more for gas prices, like grocery prices are not going down or not going down enough, they're not going to look at the specific job reports. They're going to look at their own pocketbook and their own checkbook. So I think when you see these type of numbers, and you see what you're feeling when you personally are spending, you're going to be concerned about the economy, and that may be reflected at the ballot box.
And when you look at potentially next year, Julie's talking about the ballot box, is there a chance that the Fed could actually cut ahead of the election? And wouldn't that give the economy a little bit of momentum and help this administration?
There seems to be some chance. The traders today, the market people started to bet that the Fed could be cutting by mid-year. That would be quite a turnaround. But of course, if they are cutting, it suggests the economy is slowing. And if the economy is slowing, that's probably not great for the politicians who want to be championing what they've done for growth and jobs over the past few years. So, as I say, we're not in recession territory yet. We're on its glide path. But you'd have to say net the economy is slowing, and that will pressure the political story that the White House wants next year.
This is all happening, of course, against the backdrop of a big conversation on how to fund our government here in Washington. And, you know, the idea of a shutdown coinciding with a slowing economy doesn't make people feel very comfortable. Anne Marie, one of the ideas we talked about yesterday was a laddered CR, a continuing resolution that Speaker Mike Johnson seems to think is a good idea. The idea would be that different agencies shut down at different times. That's about as far as we've gotten. The House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, addressed that earlier today.
This notion of a so-called laddered CR, like the novelty, being delicate with my words here, the novelty of my friends on the other side of the aisle in terms of how they come up with language that disguise their intentions. Translation, they want to shut the government down.
They want to shut it down, Julie Fine. That's just 2 weeks from now. Is he right?
I don't know if they want to shut it down. I think, you know, as we saw before, it goes back and forth so much. But I think there's always this question in your mind of, when you get to that shutdown, how it affects everything moving forward and how it affects, again, you got to look at it like you're in an election year. And the sentiment will continue to be, okay, you didn't shut it down, but you partially shut it down. When is Congress going to get this done? So I think, again, I think they may come to the edge, and we're not exactly sure how a new Republican speaker will handle this. But I think one thing that's fairly certain is people get very frustrated when this continues to happen over and over.
Julie, what do you make of the fact, though, that now Speaker Johnson is calling for a laddered CR, which, I mean, Hakeem Jeffries there seemed confused at what this even meant. But at the same time, he's actually first said that he would have a CR in January or in April. Is he just trying to maybe shore up more support within the Republican Party? Because it feels like every day he's almost changing his tune.
Well, I think this is what happens when you have different factions within a party that you're trying to appease in order to get everything done. This is not a new phenomenon. Look at Kevin McCarthy. So now I think the reality of this job really may be setting in. Yes, he had support from the Freedom Caucus. Now he has to keep everybody happy. That includes the moderates. That's what I think is happening.
Of course, all of this, Joe, is happening under the cloud of conflict. The other massive story continues. It is being debated right now in Congress. Right. But we also had Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Tel Aviv. Next, he's going to Jordan. This is an incredibly challenging time for this administration. And while they're debating to keep the government even open, they have to figure out what they're doing with this aid. And
it really remains unclear. You know, that was seen to be a win for Speaker Johnson yesterday, passing the Israel-only bill on the floor of the House, but we know that's not going anywhere in the Senate. So there are a lot of questions about what form this might take, or the Senate might jam the House. But we've already heard that that Senate bill, including Ukraine money, for instance, cannot pass the House. So maybe we haven't seen the version yet that will become law, because at some point this goes into conference and it comes out unrecognizable. Yes, absolutely. All right, Bloomberg's Julie Fine and Enda Kern, thank you so much for joining us. Coming on the program, the UAW strikes against the big three automakers may be over, but there's more labor strife on the horizon. Former Deputy Secretary of Labor Seth Harris will be with us next on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
The October jobs report showed a slight rise in unemployment to 3.9%. We're going to go now to Seth Harris, senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. He's also a former deputy labor secretary and top labor policy advisor to President Biden. Seth, thank you so much. Let's start with that unemployment rate, 3.9%. The president loves to say the unemployment rate has been below 4%. It has been now 21 months. But
23 months, I think it is.
I think it's 21. I checked this morning with
Okay.
Kaylee Lyons.
All
but
right.
all right, you are the professional.
You and I'll do the math together.
So the fact of the matter is, though, it is ticking higher. And there's some cases like black women that you see unemployment rising. And if the economy is slowing, how big of a problem is this going to be, say, January, February, March of next year?
Well, so 1 month of data doesn't suggest a trend line. So we had last month a huge increase in jobs. The month before that, it was a lot less. The month before that,
today.
it was higher. Yeah, there were revisions, but still it revised down from 297,000 jobs in 1 month. We have no sign of a recession. We have no sign of a dramatic slowdown. We are not seeing significant increases in layoffs. The most depressing thing about the state of the economy is the way it's being talked about on television and in other places. Pundits want to predict that there's going to be something really negative happening.
Why?
Well, because if you predict the future, they have you back on the show.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So I'm going to. So
predict the future for us so we can have you back.
Right. I think we're going. Well, I hope you'll have me back either way.
Of course we will.
But what we're seeing is a sustainable, moderate growth in jobs, sustainable, moderate growth in wages. And we are not seeing the kind of disruptions that would suggest that the labor market is in trouble. So layoffs would be an indication of that, right? A dramatic drop in the number of people quitting their jobs, that would be an indication of that. We're not seeing any of those things. What we're seeing is steady, moderate growth. We're very deep into this jobs recovery. We expect the economy, or at least the jobs market, to slow down a little bit. Now it's at a sustainable long-term path. We'll have to see. There can be oil shocks. There can be other things that happen in the economy that will disrupt it. But there's no massive disruptive event out there that is going to cause this economy to get into a jobs recession.
The issue, though, becomes if inflation doesn't actually go down, because poll after poll continues to show that Americans are suffering under inflation. Grocery prices are higher. Some energy prices are still higher. Rents are higher. How difficult is that for this administration to manage and balance that message?
I think we have to hear the American people a little bit more clearly. They're not complaining about inflation. Inflation has come down from 9% to somewhere slightly north of 3%. The American people expect inflation to stay at about where it is right now. They're not worried about price increases. They're worried about the absolute price of gas when they go to the gas station and they fill up their tank. They're seeing a 3 at the start of that number that they're paying, and they're really unhappy about that. They're unhappy about the price of eggs. They're unhappy about the price of other food. But we don't want a big deflation. That would be a sign that things are going terribly in the economy. That would be really catastrophic for the economy. So people are unhappy that they are paying more. That's certainly understandable. But the inflation rate has come way down, and we are pretty close to the Fed target right now if you look at the last quarter. So I don't think it's inflation, it's prices. And that's understandable. They don't like paying massive profits to corporations that have jacked up their prices.
You know what I'm surprised I'm not hearing today from the administration is, hey, you know what? We just ended this UAW strike. They all got better wages and a better life. That was, 35,000 people? If they had not been on the picket line doing God's work, this top line would have actually beat expectations. But I know there's a push and pull with the Fed here, and maybe that wouldn't be great for this White House. Are you surprised the president didn't go there today?
Well, I know he wouldn't claim credit for solving the negotiations between the UAW. But yes, you're right that these jobs numbers are reduced by about 33,000 because of the strike by the UAW, another 44,000 because of the strike by SAG-AFTRA. So the numbers are lower than they would be.
Next month?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to be very careful about predicting the future. I think we're going to see some version of what we're seeing now, somewhere between, say, 125 and 200. I think we can sustain this. We'll see wages around the range where we are right now. It was 7 cents. It may go down a little bit because the labor market is slowing a little bit. But Yeah, I don't think the president wants to go out and start taking credit for collective bargaining going well.
Well, he's the first president to walk the picket line, though. He might have some grounds there.
He's the most pro-union president in history, Joe.
That.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you heard that before?
I don't know where that came from.
I wonder who gave him that line when he was running. Speaking of this, though, Toyota is hiking pay for its assembly workers following the UAW strike against the Big Three, as Joe was talking about. And President Shawn Fain, the president of the UAW, spoke on the issue. Take a listen.
Toyota isn't giving out raises out of the goodness of their heart. Toyota is the largest and most profitable auto company in the world. They could have just as easily raised wages a month ago or a year ago. They did it now because the company knows we're coming for them. The company knows that Toyota workers are watching. And when the time comes, Toyota workers and all non-union auto workers are going to be ready to stand up.
Last time you were on, you told me it was not a hot labor summer. We have seen labor strike after labor strike. Nurses, now also culinary workers in Las Vegas are preparing for a labor strike. Does what UAW, what they did, and they were successful, does that fuel more labor strikes? And then, to Joe's point, make it much harder for the Fed?
Well, I don't think the Fed is all that worried about strikes. Remember, in the context of the American economy, where we have 160 million workers, 150,000 workers going out on strike. In this case, it was only 35,000 workers going out on strike. That's not really going to move the needle from a macroeconomic perspective. But the answer to your question is, yeah. There's no question that strikes beget other strikes. And the reason for that, particularly when a strike is as immensely successful as the UAW strike, the Teamsters negotiations with UPS, the Writers Guild strike was immensely successful. The reason that begets other strikes is other workers look at that and they say, we can win. If we fight, we can win. And we can get significantly better raises. We can get much better cost of living adjustments.
Better raises, then the company may have to raise prices for consumer. Isn't this become a little bit of an inflation cycle?
No, well, but let's look at it the other way. The car companies raised their prices before the workers got their raises, right? So the idea that it's a wage price spiral has it backwards. The companies raised the prices because they wanted to jack up their profits. And that's how capitalism works. And then workers have to fight to be able to afford those cars by getting more in their pocketbooks, getting more in their paychecks. So, yeah, I think that workers all over the country at Toyota, at Tesla, at Nissan, at other companies are looking at the UAW and saying, you know what, I'd like to have those guys fighting for me and my family.
Talk to us about what's going on in Las Vegas. They've transformed the entire strip into an F1 racetrack. It's a huge event that's about to tip off there. And the culinary union on the strip, it looks like it could go on strike essentially on the eve of this event. First of all, are you hearing that's going to happen? And would it have happened without being emboldened by someone like Shawn Fain?
Well, that's a very militant union, the culinary workers, and also you left out the bartenders, who are among the most important people in all of Las Vegas, some of the most powerful, important people in Vegas. Isn't that right? So they have always been ready to strike, and they have always been ready to raise their wages. So, but I'm not ready to say it's going to happen, and I don't want to disclose any conversations I may or may not have had with folks. But I think they are ready to go if they can't get the hotel casinos to change the way they're approaching these negotiations. You know, there are two models out there. There's the Teamsters UPS model, where the company really gets it and they cut a deal that the workers can support. Then there's the Hollywood Studios model, where they just can't stop getting it wrong. They're not listening. They're not paying attention to their workers. They don't understand the state of worker power in our society. And that's why they had what could have been the longest writers' strike in history. They still have an actors' strike underway. They're losing billions and billions of dollars. So the question for the casinos and for lots of other employers in the United States is, which model do I want to follow? Do I want to be like UPS, or do I want my business shut down for months and cost billions?
You know what, though? As you're talking about, you don't want to forecast what's going to happen. This is what exactly you said about UAW and the big three autos, what you're telling us about the culinary workers. You said this to us about 2 weeks before they actually hit the picket line. Well, so I think we can maybe expect the culinary workers to go on strike.
I don't know, though. They've got guys like Tom Keene coming in to spend the week there and watch the F1. And I wonder if these resorts turn out with a big offer before that ends up happening.
Incredibly embarrassing.
Embarrassing and a lot of money to lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice to see you back at the table.
Good seeing you.
Thanks for being here. Seth Harris, of course, with us on Bloomberg. Coming up, more on the state of the labor market. U.S. jobs growth slowing more than expected. Unemployment inching higher, as we've been discussing. And we'll get the details on the data next with Kaylee Lyons. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
I'm pleased with the number. It came in at a level that is consistent with what my outlook has been, and it really tells me that our policies are really starting to work through the economy in a way that can help us get to our 2% target for inflation with minimal pain is what I'm hoping for.
Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic on Bloomberg TV earlier today reacting to the softer than expected jobs report we've been discussing. The market adjusting expectations now for the Fed's path forward. Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons is here with a closer look. What should we know, Kaylee?
Well, Joe, this is kind of the good kind of soft, if you will, the kind of softness that the market and Federal Reserve, frankly, is really looking for. You might even call it Goldilocks if we're thinking about it in like porridge terms, because yes, you did have an unemployment rate ticking up. The figure on non-farm payrolls was a little bit lower, but this is what the Fed is trying to orchestrate. They want to see a demand deterioration in the labor market. They don't want to break it entirely, but they kind of want things to head in this direction. So, and especially when you're considering that wage gains aren't heating up, in fact, are cooling down, that's the kind of thing they like to see as well. So the market takes this and says, all right, the Fed's not going to have to do much more work. Hence the dropping like a stone we saw yet again today in bond yields. The 10-year yield dropped about 9 basis points over the last 3 days, I believe, down 35 basis points. So there really is a reassessment now of what the Fed's going to do. Not only is the Fed, is the market betting the Fed is not going to have to hike again, or there's a very low probability of it, they bet they are going to be cutting more in 2024. About 100 basis points of cuts are now priced in. So basically 4 full cuts starting in June rather than the July that was seen before. But of course, our very own Michael McKee also asked Raphael Bostic what he thought about how long they were going to have to keep rates at high levels. And this was his answer.
For me, I would say it's going to be in the second half of next year. Of course, that's still 8 months from now, 10 months from now. A lot's going to happen. So I don't try to get too precise and exactly it's going to be this meeting where something happens. But it is still a ways off.
He went on to say that a lot of it is going to depend on the trajectory of inflation, keeping in mind that's the other portion of the Fed's dual mandate. They don't just care about the labor market. They want to get down to that 2% target. And the fact is we are still above it. And he did point out that before they make another decision, they are going to get more data. CPI, November 14th. So circle that one on your calendars.
Yeah, absolutely. But Seth Harris was just saying he thinks they're getting ever closer to 2%. But that one last percent is going to be almost the hardest for the Fed to tackle. All right, Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons. Thanks for wrapping that all up for us. Coming in the program, former Virginia Congressman Devin Riggleman will be with us right here on set to look at the state of the GOP. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. Congress had an eventful week, another one, with Speaker Johnson's first bill passing the House. He got one on the board, but it's destined to go nowhere in the Senate. As we bring in now former Virginia Congressman Denver Riggleman to continue the conversation on this Friday. Welcome to the table. It's really great to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you here in the flesh. This is why you're making bourbon now, right? So you could avoid all this stuff, I'm assuming?
It's like when I first saw the Meadows text, I had to take a drink of bourbon. So it's exactly the same thing.
How many shots are you taking these days?
It was 2,319 texts, so you could.
That's
imagine.
A lot.
No, but these days, though, I think even more. No, it's been pretty crazy to watch what's going on in the House.
Well, you worked with the new Speaker. It's interesting, Anne-Marie, the day that the Speaker was elected, there were members, including members of the leadership, who were coming on to tell us they didn't really know anything about this individual. You were on his committee as chair on the study committee. I heard from Nancy Pelosi yesterday, who held a briefing with reporters, and I asked her if she thought an election denier could succeed as Speaker. her answer was very short. She said, all I'll tell you is Republicans wanted Donald Trump to be their speaker, and they got him. Is that true?
Pretty true. I mean, you've got somebody who's completely aligned. You know, he was under the radar. You know, when they filed the amicus brief, I think it was 126 of them about the, election results. You're talking about somebody who really led the effort on election denialism, but he was quiet about it. So he was in the text messages that we saw in the January 6th committee, but he was only mentioned. He actually wasn't in the to from, but he was the one sending the personal correspondence saying that they had Donald Trump's back when it came to Stop the Steal. So it's incredible where we are today. From January 6th now, almost 3 years later, by the way, we now have sort of a J6 election denier leadership in the GOP. And for somebody who's former GOP, it's pretty stunning.
When you look at all the challenges this Congress faces, the country faces, you look at Israel aiding Ukraine, southern border, keeping the government open. What's his thought process behind?
When I look at everything that's happening, every single decision that's made, if you're looking at Israel funding or tying IRSD funding to Israel funding, you're talking about trying to separate out Ukraine funding. All that is really about a cult of personality. It's about Donald Trump. Now, people can wrap certain arguments around it. You can say, oh, there's corruption in Ukraine. That's why we don't want to fund it. That's pretty much BS. I mean, what you're talking about is they're trying to make one man happy. They're looking at the 2024 election, and you have somebody that's running that agenda. So if you look at it through that lens, a lot of people want to try to wrap policy wrappers around it. Really what it comes down to is they're just trying to make Donald Trump happy. He didn't like Ukraine. He had some issues with Zelensky, as you know. But it seems to me that a lot of these are petty and are actually based on a cult of personality rather than real policy decisions.
Well, so having been on the inside, what's your gut check on what's happening now? He got this bill passed that is DOA in the Senate. We understand from leadership, even Tom Cole said the Senate bill can't pass the House. Is Israel going to be in a situation where it's not getting the aid it needs? Is Ukraine going to be in that situation? Is this all going to coincide with a government shutdown?
I've said for a long time that we need to have adults back in the room. And when you have people passing unserious legislation where they're basing any of their policy arguments on fantasy or magical thinking, you get bills that are dead or DOA based on what their belief systems are rather than what's best for the United States of America. And I think that's what you're seeing right now is you have unserious legislators trying to do serious business. And when you get to that point, I think the American people need to decide whether they want to keep electing these types within those districts to office, or it's time to get serious and actually purge those individuals who are already in the election denialism stream. Hey, if you're susceptible to that, you're susceptible to anything. And that's the thing, again, that scares me as somebody who wants to be facts-based or truth-based, is you have individuals making decisions that have a tough time really discerning between reality and fantasy.
You talk about the American voters deciding. What is the state of this GOP in the House, given a lot of the dysfunction, the paralysis we've seen? What do you think this means for November of next year?
I think it means a 20 to 30 seat loss for the GOP in the House. I think there's a real possibility that the House and the Senate are democratically controlled. The presidency, though, it worries me. I think Trump does have a chance. I mean, if you look at all the dynamics and the odd things that are going on in America right now, you have this brand of unseriousness, but you also have people who will not change their message if they're in an R+10 district or above. If they're in a district that's predominantly Republican, they're not going to change their message. So you're going to get those same type of, I try to use a scientific term, whack jobs, but that's what you actually, sort of get, coming back into congressional seats.
A lot of people are looking at your state of Virginia with elections coming up around the corner here, and a lot of folks seem to be basing the future trajectory of Governor Youngkin's career on the outcome. If he can sweep the legislature, turn it red, does he run for president?
First of all, I don't think he turns it red.
No?
So I don't think he runs for president. So I'm just fortunate I get to talk to a lot of people. But, when it comes down to it, I think there's a possibility the GOP holds the House on the state side in Virginia, but I don't think they do, and I don't think they take the Senate. So I think it's very possible that Governor Youngkin has a House of Delegates and a Senate that are really majority ruled by Democrats.
Well, to build on that, if he doesn't sweep Virginia red, there's a less likelihood that he would then jump into the race for presidency. So do you think that it is a foregone conclusion it's going to be Donald Trump next November?
I think I was an intelligence officer, so you never say 100% ever. But I do believe there's probably an 80 to 90% chance that he's in, and I think he's the presumptive nominee. And I think if they're going to be doing polling, I think if you look at the crosstabs and the number of people in the Republican base who believe the election was stolen, it's still above 70%, might be closer to 75%. What does Youngkin run on? Election denialism? Wow. I mean, what does he do? And if you look at the House right now, you think a Mike Johnson or anybody in leadership is going to help old Glenn Youngkin get across the line? Hell no, right? So I think they're going to be looking at polling and what the state of affairs are in the House, what the state of affairs are in Virginia in the House and Senate, the federal House and the state House and the state Senate. And I think their polling and crosstabs are going to tell them it's going to be a tough run to go against Donald Trump for 2024.
With your intelligence cap on, we're told that this is one of the most dangerous moments ever for the world based on the conflicts that we're seeing and certainly with what is breaking out now in Israel. Christopher Wray told Congressional testimony that domestic terror threats are rising along with this global temperature that's going up. We don't know exactly what's going to happen even this weekend. How concerned are you? What's the gravest threat that keeps you up at night?
Domestic terrorism is the gravest threat that keeps me up at night. And but I'll tell you this, it's almost a perfect storm. If you look at Israel, I've been in the tunnels. I've been in Israel. Yeah, I've been in the tunnels. I've been in the north and south. I've been in the tunnels. I've been in places that I think people would be very disturbed if they knew what was going on in Israel. And if you look at
side?
What's that?
On which side?
Oh, I mean, oh my goodness. Especially when you're talking about Israel specifically and how easy it was to actually get through their defenses. Yeah. But now, when you're looking at Hamas, when you're looking at their ability to shield themselves using, humans. I mean, I got to actually talk to Saeb Erekat. I mean, I was there. And I know really how they thought in the PLO when I was in, Ramallah. But I think we're to a point that with Israel, with Ukraine, with what's going on here, with the disinformation, with the fact that you have so much going on, even with sort of this bloom in white nationalism here in the country, I'm looking at all this, and I think there's a lot of intelligence individuals that are saying, hey, we always have this chance for foreign types of terrorism, but when you're looking domestically, when this all becomes this rabid stew of hate and the inability to govern, if you throw that on top of that, how long it just took to get a speaker. Now when you're looking at some of the bills that they're passing, I mean, you get to the point, you're like, my goodness, there's so many threat matrices here. The courses of action are huge. And you're going to have to stack that in some way. And I think that stack is very frightening, to people who used to look at this for a living.
Yeah, it certainly is. Former Virginia Congressman Denver Riggleman, thank you so much for joining us. Coming in the program, House Republicans have passed a $14.3 billion Israel aid package tied to cuts to the IRS funding. Our political panel weighs in. Rick Davis and Jeannie Sheehan Zaino are back with us next. This is Bloomberg.
It's my hope that my Republican colleagues, who only represent barely half of 1/3 of the federal government, will come to the conclusion that the only way forward is to find bipartisan common ground.
That was New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries earlier today. For more, let's bring in our political panel. Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, and Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, political science professor at Iona University. Thank you both for joining us, our closers this Friday evening. Jeannie, let's start with you. We heard all week from the Speaker, Johnson, and now we're hearing a lot today from Hakeem Jeffries. Earlier, he was talking about the fact that he doesn't really quite understand how to keep a government open with the latter CR. But at the same time, they can shake their heads at the Republican Party and some of the dysfunction there, but they still need to work with this Republican Party if they're going to pass legislation. How do you see them moving forward with something like, say, Israel, when 12 Democrats voted for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the Israel issue, the good thing is, and the positive news is, there is a lot of agreement across both the House and the Senate, both parties. There is widespread agreement that we need to support Israel. But of course, the pay for is problematic. And of course, the issue of tying or not tying it to Ukraine is problematic. But I do think the fact that there is so much agreement on needed to get the support done, when they do go to conference, hopefully they will be able to work something out. I can't say I am as optimistic about the issue of the CR. First of all, I still have have found nobody who can explain to me what the latter CR is. But getting beyond that, the issue of tying a CR to cuts is exactly what got Kevin McCarthy thrown out of his job. And I think we are headed down the same path. So I do hope they get a CR, and I do hope it's through January. But if they're going to tie cuts, they're going to have to work across the aisle to do that, or not tie any cuts and just work on passing these bills independently.
Rick, what do you make of the dozen Democrats who voted for this? By the way, one of them was on with us yesterday on Bloomberg Sound On. Debbie Wasserman Schultz said she was not going to vote for it. Is this the persuasive powers of Mike Johnson, or are they afraid that they're going to have ads running against them saying they voted against Israel?
I think it's more the persuasive power of AIPAC, Israel's lobby on Capitol Hill, right? I mean, like, these are tough times for Israel, and even though there's a poison pill, that Jeannie absolutely hates in this bill, a dozen Democrats crossed the aisle and voted for it, and it just shows you both the power of the lobby, but also the importance of showing support for Israel right now. I mean, Congress gets it on this, right? On big issues like war and peace, generally these guys are going to show up in the right place.
But do they get it? Because it is almost unprecedented that you would have a pay for an emergency.
First of all, supplementals always had to be paid for, right? They're supplemental. They're not in a budget. So where are you going to get the money for it? Oh, you're just going to write a check. It's emergency aid. And the reality is, when you boil it all down, it's not going to take that much more time to do it the way it's being done right now. It's never the same. Supplementals in the Senate and the House are always needing to be reconciled. So it's always going to take about 2 weeks to do that. And that's what this is going to take. The fact that Speaker Johnson just came up with this particularly pernicious poison pill to stick on there to make the right wing of his caucus happy. Shocker. That's all that, McCarthy did for the last year and a half in his term, or last year in his term. Didn't quite make it to a year, I guess. And so, like, none of this is new. None of this is surprising. And Republicans have a good talking point where they're saying, hey, we're trying to cut government spending. Democrats are going to say, oh, it's just going to result in more debt. And, that bill's not going to ever see the light of day. There'll be a bill that does, and it'll get done in 2 weeks, and the president will sign it, and the money will get over to Israel.
Doesn't he make that sound easy? He makes it sound very easy, Jeannie, but I want you to fill in the blanks for us, because Rick just mentioned you don't like this, and a lot of Democrats, even some Republicans don't like this idea of the IRS pay-fors. But there could be others. What other unspent money would satisfy you and bring you to a yes vote?
Yeah, Joe, I want to treat this like a debate. When Rick Davis name checks me, I want my 30 seconds to rebut.
You get your 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. So the reality is, it's not just Democrats or, certain people. Anybody fiscally responsible, and I do agree that there should be pay-fors, but a pay-for should pay for something, hence the term. And this pays for nothing. It adds $26 billion to the deficit. That's our money as taxpayers. If Mike Johnson wants to pay for this, and I agree with that, then do something fiscally responsible. Don't put it on the back of the IRS, one of the only agencies that actually pays for itself. That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of areas where you can think about looking for that pay for, but the reality is, politically, those are things that Mike Johnson and Republicans and Democrats in some case don't want to touch. So if you want to be fiscally responsible, be that, but don't pretend you are being and then say, oh gosh, I don't know why the other side doesn't want to pay for things. Fiscally responsible people want to pay for things the right way, which means they are actually paid for and not adding $26 billion to our deficit.
Jeannie, do you think the Democrats then should go to Mr. Johnson and say, we want Israel aid too. We understand you're in this position. The deficit is at, what, $33 trillion? Here is a pay-for we can get behind. What would that be? What does that look like?
Absolutely. They should go. They should be. Hopefully this happens in conference or it happens in some communication. But they should go to the speaker and they should say, we want to be fiscally responsible and here are our ideas to do this. Now, have the Democrats done that? Not as far as I know. And that, to me, is a problem. So I do think they should get in line and start to have those conversations. And that's one again, positive thing that we've seen out of today, which is that Hakeem Jeffries sounds fairly positive. He had seemingly had a good meeting with Mike Johnson, and hopefully they can work together. I understand Mike Johnson is in a really difficult position, but the reality is that if you want to pay for something, pay for it. Or be honest, this has nothing to do with pay for it. This has to do with placating your Republican base. And let's go there.
All right. So you would have been buzzed on your 30 seconds, and I know we're out of time. We got to go. But are you guys kind of agreeing on this?
No, absolutely. We totally disagree.
You disagree on
$80 billion of new money went into the IRS, and CBO just made up some numbers as to what they thought they could get out of that.
You don't believe the CBO either?
No, I think the CBO numbers are bunk. If I could save $14 billion in return for a promise into the future sometime, 10 years from now, maybe there'll be more. I mean, come on. You got to be kidding me. They won't miss the $14 billion at the IRS.
This is why they're with us every Friday. Rick and Jeannie back with us to look ahead to next week with a Republican debate on Wednesday and former President Trump on the stand Monday. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV as we reassemble our political panel. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us looking ahead to a really important week. Not only do we have the debate on Wednesday, but we're going to be popping corn on Monday to watch the former president of the United States apparently take the stand. Not that we'll be watching it live like that, in this case in New York. Rick Davis, we've seen the kids. We've seen Don Jr. and Eric testify to the value of their company's property, to the veracity of the Trump brand. This could go off the rails on Monday, though. What does Donald Trump do on the stand?
Yeah, we had no idea this was going to be so much fun. This was supposed to be the one case that nobody was going to care about. Now everybody's talking about it because it actually does what you say. It cuts right at the heart of who Donald Trump is, his brand, his wealth, his managerial capability. And we just heard from both of his sons say, we have no managerial capability. One of them said, I just pour concrete. And so, it's the kind of thing where it's kind of like the man bites dog scenario, where so many things are happening right now in this case that you never expected to have happen at the very beginning. The reality is this case is actually already done. This is the proof point, right? This is now penalty phase. He's already been found fraudulent. And so now it's just piling on. And I can't wait to see the reporting out on Monday. I mean, whoever thought you'd have this kind of fun with a presidential candidate who's running first in the polls within his party, who's actually got to take a witness stand and defend his brand, what made him famous to begin with, which is, his kind of, shady business dealings.
And his brand. You mentioned the kids. Eric Trump, the former president's son, testified earlier in the New York fraud trial. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It's an absolute joke. And guys, we're going to win this thing. I promise you we're going to win it because we haven't done a damn thing wrong.
Jeannie, he's calling it an absolute joke. He sounds like his father there. He also said that he would never sign documents that were not accurate. Even though a judge determined these documents were fraudulent, they were going to hear anything different from his kids, or also playing to former president's emotions. Do you think this bothers him, seeing that his kids are being dragged into this?
It absolutely does. I tend to follow him on Truth Social, so I know how much it bothers him, and he has made that perfectly clear. I have a little pet peeve with Donald Trump, just a little one. He keeps referring to them as kids. They are grown adults. They had a fiduciary legal responsibility. I think they're almost like 50. They had a fiduciary legal responsibility, and if they couldn't live up to that fiduciary legal responsibility, it's not the kind of thing, unfortunately, that you can just say, oh boy, I didn't understand. Then you shouldn't have become the trustee while your father was president. And that's the reality. This thing is already decided by the judge. And of course, this judge can have very sort of cold feelings towards Donald Trump at this point, given the attacks that he's been under.
I feel like we need an extra hour for Jeannie tonight. We'll have what she's having. Republicans are headed for Florida, the Freedom Summit this weekend, Rick. Although Nikki Haley apparently is not going to be going, whether you see that as an issue, she will be on the stage at this Republican debate next week. I wonder your thoughts going into this. We'll get the final field on Monday. Is this a last stand for Ron DeSantis? That's not a high heel remark.
Yeah, that's a high heel remark. And by the way, it's Kool-Aid. Jeannie's drinking the Kool-Aid, so
wow.
you can have all that you want.
You're going to need an hour.
You'll get your 30 seconds, Jeannie.
No, I didn't body check her, whatever that is. The reality is that she doesn't lose anything by not doing this Florida thing. It doesn't make any difference to the campaign where they pay $25,000 or $100,000 to get on the ballot in Florida. She'll be on the ballot. And frankly, she's got enough momentum right now where, hanging around the rest of that group and being contrasted with them is more their problem than her problem. They need her to show up to be more credible, especially with Donald Trump nowhere to be seen. So I think that, it could be very difficult for DeSantis right now because going into this next debate next week, he's not going to have any really sort of momentum to carry him into there. And so he's going to have to start fresh and try to contrast with her. He's running lots of ads against her right now. He sees her as taking the oxygen out of the room for him. And this may be the last debate that he has a chance to do that in, where it could still have an impact.
It's going to be a really important debate next week in Florida. All right, Rick Davis, Jeannie Shanzano, thank you both for joining us this evening on Friday. Our closers, check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online for more stories like this.
I got to cool off from that panel. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.